Everyone knows Annabelle or the Amityville horror, the most famous files of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Today, we open the true vault of their records, hidden chronicles, lesser known, yet deeply disturbing. We are talking about demonic oppression in peaceful suburbs, a real case of lycanthropy in England, and a highly controversial trial that challenged the U.S. judicial system by trying to use the devil as a legal defense. Ed, the demonologist, and Lorraine, the clairvoyant, investigated over 10,000 cases. Prepare yourself, because today we explore the true terror that history tried to forget. For over half a century, this married couple walked through places where spiritual danger was absolute. Ed Warren, a self-taught demonologist with a pragmatic, direct attitude, combined his efforts with Lorraine Warren, a clairvoyant who claimed to see and feel the energies of the spiritual world. Together, they founded the New England Society for Psychic Research and registered thousands of cases over their extensive careers. But what truly hides behind the thick files that accumulated in their offices? Today, we examine the chronicles of real terror that altered the lives of the victims who turned to them when they had no other alternative left. Before becoming public figures of international renown, the couple spent much of their time traveling through small towns, responding to desperate calls from ordinary families who felt abandoned by traditional science and religious institutions. In 1974, one of those calls for help came from the Percival family, who resided in a quiet neighborhood in Connecticut. To their neighbors, the Percivals represented the ideal suburban family. However, within the walls of their property, an invisible entity was unleashing a constant, calculated psychological war. The manifestations began by affecting the senses of the home's inhabitants. A subtle, metallic odor, similar to rotting meat, began to float through the hallways without any physical cause. To this unpleasant phenomenon were added drastic drops in temperature. Suddenly, highly localized areas of the house suffered such extreme drops in heat that they transformed a warm living room into a freezing environment in seconds. When Ed and Lorraine Warren first arrived at the property, they did not find a chaotic scene with floating objects, but rather a family worn down by lack of sleep, anxiety, and pure terror. The father of the family showed Ed a series of alarming marks on his body, 3 deep, parallel scratches on his chest. These wounds had appeared overnight while he slept, causing a constant burning sensation and breaking the skin enough to leave deep cuts. Meanwhile, Lorraine Warren headed straight toward the master bedroom, guided by her perceptions. According to her journals, the moment she crossed the threshold, she was struck by an intense wave of nausea. She described a dark, dense mass floating near the ceiling, an entity that, according to her conclusions, was not of human origin and was actively feeding on the fear of the residents. To obtain evidence, Ed Warren set up his magnetic recording equipment to detect anomalies in the audio spectrum. In the 1970s, their tools were rudimentary, limited almost entirely to reel-to-reel audio tapes. During a tense vigil that lasted until the late hours of the night, Ed began a session of direct verbal confrontation, demanding that the presence reveal itself. The response captured was not a voice, but a succession of rhythmic, heavy thuds echoing from inside the walls. Almost immediately, the windows of 3 different rooms shattered simultaneously. Ed officially classified the scenario under the term demonic oppression, according to his theories. This is a critical phase where the malevolent agent wears down the victim's willpower to make them vulnerable to possession. The Warrens coordinated the intervention of a local priest who performed a formal blessing. Although the manifestations ceased after the rite, the family decided to leave the property a few weeks later due to the residual emotional impact. With the passage of time, the types of situations the couple handled began to gain public notoriety, bringing their names to stages of great civil relevance. In 1981, the Warrens became involved in a criminal proceeding that deeply shocked the judicial system in the United States. The chain of events began in the town of Brookfield, Connecticut, affecting an 11-year-old boy named David Glatzel. The minor experienced extreme behavioral alterations, characterized by uncontrollable crying, the use of extremely deep and guttural voice modulations that did not correspond to his age, and the appearance of physical marks on his body. Facing the failure of traditional medical evaluations to find a satisfactory diagnosis, the boy's relatives decided to contact Ed and Lorraine Warren. The couple went to the home and was present at several prayer sessions and minor exorcisms focused on relieving little David. During these encounters, Lorraine claimed to perceive how the force tormenting the child was actively seeking a new physical vehicle with greater strength. Present at those meetings was Aunt Cheyenne Johnson, a 19-year-old youth dating David's older sister. In a fit of desperation, upon seeing the minor's suffering, Anne openly challenged the invisible presence, shouting at it to leave the child's body and enter him. Ed Warren immediately intervened, severely reprimanding the young man and warning him that a direct challenge should never be made, given that hostile forces exploit any type of consent or invitation to attach themselves to a new target. Unfortunately, the consequences would not take long to manifest. Months after that incident, on February 16, 1981, a heated dispute broke out between Anne and the owner of the property, Alan Bono. According to witnesses, Anne's behavior changed suddenly. His eyes looked vacant, and he began to make strange noises before lunging at his opponent. In a fit of unusual violence, the youth drew a knife and repeatedly struck Bono in the torso, leading to a fatal outcome a few hours later at the local hospital. When the legal process began, Anne's defense attorney, backed by the reports previously gathered by the Warrens, attempted an unprecedented strategy. They presented a declaration of innocence, arguing that the accused was under a state of full demonic possession at the precise moment he executed the physical attack. As expected, the judge rejected the validity of the paranormal hypothesis, ruling that such a condition was impossible to corroborate through the scientific standards required by a court, declaring that the law only evaluates voluntary and demonstrable human actions. Anne was tried under traditional charges of manslaughter, receiving a sentence that led him to serve 5 years in prison. This trial remains a focus of debate among investigators and criminologists. In 1987, the couple's investigations took an international turn when they made the decision to cross the Atlantic Ocean to travel to England, motivated by a highly unusual file that presented characteristics very different from those of typical residential manifestations. It was the case of Bill Ramsey, a citizen residing in the town of Southend-on-Sea, who came to be referred to under the alias of the Werewolf. Ramsey was an individual with an apparently stable life. He worked steadily and was considered to be a family man dedicated to his obligations. However, behind that facade of normalcy, the man carried a hidden history that dated back to his childhood, a period in which he began to experience sporadic and uncontrollable bouts of a purely animal rage. One of the strangest incidents of his childhood occurred when, in the middle of one of these fits of anger, he tore apart a section of a wire fence with his own teeth. Upon reaching maturity, these periodic crises increased in violence, becoming completely unpredictable for him and his family. Toward the end of the 1980s, the severity of Bill Ramsey's episodes reached such a critical point that local law enforcement developed a genuine fear of his reactions. During one of his most intense crises in a public space, the physical intervention of 6 large police officers was required to successfully subdue him and transfer him to the police station. Those who witnessed the event described that the man's hands contorted, adopting the rigidity of claws. His facial features became distorted, adopting an expression of attack, and he manifested a degree of physical strength that exceeded the normal anatomical limits of a human being. It was not a simple outbreak of civil violence, but rather behavior where the subject operated with movement patterns identical to those of a 4-legged predator, attempting to bite anyone who tried to approach. Analyzing the reports coming from the United Kingdom, Ed Warren used his knowledge of classical theology to propose an alternative diagnosis. He concluded that the subject did not suffer from a biological mutation, but rather a variant of spiritual affliction called demonic lycanthropy, a state where an outside element forces the individual to adopt the instincts of a wild beast. The couple managed to convince Bill Ramsey to move to the United States in order to undergo an exhaustive evaluation in a controlled environment. Thus, a formal exorcism service was organized in a chapel in Connecticut under the direction of Bishop Robert McKenna. The written testimonies and sound recordings documenting the events of that day describe highly complex scenes. Upon beginning the reading of the religious texts in Latin, the man's behavior altered immediately. He stopped uttering words to produce low growls and prolonged howls similar to those of a hunting animal. It was recorded that his rib cage underwent a notable expansion and his lips tensed, exposing his teeth, lunging aggressively toward the officiant while extending his hands in an attack position. Lorraine Warren later recounted that the density of the air inside the room became so heavy that it made breathing difficult for those present. After several hours of uninterrupted spiritual confrontation, the subject experienced a total physical collapse, falling to the ground in tears and fully regaining consciousness. Ramsey returned to his country of origin, and subsequent reports indicated that the outbreaks of animal behavior did not manifest again in his life. The discussion around whether the case was due to an undetected mental health disorder or a real paranormal intervention remains open. Maintaining an activity constantly linked to situations of high emotional tension ended up taking a toll on the health of both investigators.